Hello and welcome once again to the latest videocast from Lewisham District Trade Union Council. We're still currently in lockdown. The date of this recording is the 30th of June 2020. At this stage we remain in lockdown, and I know I preface all these videocasts and podcasts and so on with this phrase, but it will be the TUC, not the Tories, who tell us when it is safe for labour movement organisations to be meeting again. And until such time as I receive that guidance from the TUC, from Congress House, the Regional Council of the TUC, then we will remain in lockdown, and the Trades Council will continue not to meet. So really all I want to do in this little short updated videocast is just to run through what I see as a few of the challenges that the movement is going to face post-COVID. And certainly one of the challenges is going to be to pose alternatives. Now, in the news this morning, and this is one of the reasons that I've decided to make this videocast today, it was announced by Boris Johnson that he is launching a £5 billion scheme that will revitalise the economy after the virus. And he's compared it to Roosevelt's New Deal. I can only think that Boris Johnson comparing himself to Roosevelt as leaving FDR spinning in his grave. But he's talking about a £5 billion revitalisation scheme of public works to get the economy up and running. So the challenge to the labour movement really is to say, well, what should we be doing? I know the leader of the Labour Party has said that the government should be lasering in. I think that was the phrase they used in the press this morning. Lasering in on a budget to save and create jobs. Well, yes, I mean there's no dispute in that at all. I mean it's rather like the Archbishop of Canterbury saying that we need a campaign against sin. It's fine words, but it doesn't really get us anywhere. We need to flesh out those sort of policies. We need to be saying how much needs to be spent, where it needs to be spent, the justification for projects and so on. Let's begin though by putting into context very briefly this £5 billion expenditure that Boris Johnson is talking about. So I think we're talking about something like about 60 billion or something to sustain businesses and jobs during the virus. So it's roughly 1/12 of that. You're talking about 200 billion, I think the figure is, on replacement of Trident. So again, that's it's an absolute drop in the ocean compared to that. And the high-speed 2 rail link between London and Birmingham, I think is coming in at about 102 billion. So that just puts those sort of expenditure figures into context. So we can tend to get very dazzled when these sort of telephone number figures are mentioned, but once you put them into context, you see it's not quite so much. So Johnson has been talking about upgrading roads and upgrading rail and rail links and so on. I see Maria Caulfield is tweeting this morning about we're shovel ready to get this new this link between rail link between Lewis and Upfield back up and running again. I'm not sure how some people living down the bottom of Morlin are going to feel about that. But anyway, we will see. I'll believe it when I see it. But they're talking about those sort of projects. But then he's talking about refurbing hospitals, and my reaction to that is to say, well, let me stop you right there, Boris. What's happened to those 40 hospitals that you promised to build as in the course of your election campaign? Even if we count these converted exhibition centres and so on, we do need to hold your feet to the fire in terms of when are these 40 hospitals going to be built, where are they going to be built, how big are they going to be, and so on. So and of course how are you going to, where the money is going to come from to staff them, because you're going to have to train up an awful lot of doctors and nurses and so on and so forth. So the challenge to the Labour movement, as I see it, is to say, well, let's ignore the froth that the Tories are throwing out, because the chances are it's never going to materialise anyway. Let's face it, I mean, I have this feeling that these figures, and the projects that they're supposed to be financed, they'll go the same way as this world-beating tracking and tracing and testing app that we were going to get up and running by the end of May or June or whatever it was, after it was trialled on the Isle of Wight, and it bombed. It's just not going to happen. And at the end of the day, you just can't trust these people. Johnson will say whatever comes into his head, to be quite honest, and that's not a good start anyway, is it? Really, there's not much comes into his head, I think, that's worth coming out of his mouth, But anyway, enough of that. The challenge that we're facing is that when this is over, we're going to need a strategy in place. We're going to need something to fight for, and that's got to start now. We've got to know where we're going along the road when this virus is past. We need objectives to fight for, and in terms of public expenditure, yes, we certainly do need a massive programme of public works. That's going to be essential. I don't think we're going to get it from a Tory government at all. I just don't think that's going to happen. But that doesn't mean to say that we can't be posing the alternatives and we shouldn't be fighting for the alternatives, because we're not. We're looking ahead. By the time this is over, we will be pretty much looking down the barrel of another general election, 2024. So it's not that far away when you think about it, and we need to be formulating a strategy now. We need to be formulating demands, things that we need to fight for in the coming years. In terms of public works and so on, I would say yes, we certainly need to upgrade the railways. We need I would say we need a publicly owned and publicly accountable transport infrastructure that is run for people rather than profit. But there were things that Johnson didn't mention in this £5 billion fantasy that he was coming out with. He didn't mention things like a massive council house building programme to eradicate homelessness. He didn't mention flood defences, which are going to be needed with climate change and global warming. They're going to be needed everywhere, not just here in Lewes. And I still say that here in Lewes, it's not a question of when the bottom of the town, if the bottom of the town floods again. I think it's a question of when. So we need a massive flood defence scheme. We need council house building. We do need more schools and hospitals. And I remember, talking about schools. He's talking about upgrading schools. I can remember years ago when Blair came into office on his mantra of education, and he'd been well briefed. He'd been talking about. He said we need. Well, I can't remember what the figure was now. I think it was something in the region of £1 billion just to upgrade and repair the schools that we've got, let alone building other schools. And I thought at the time he'd been pretty well briefed on that. And that's still going to be the issue. And fair play to Blair. I mean, for about 18 months, I mean, it was absolutely raining money into schools. You got rid of all the old-fashioned crystal windows, and you got sealed, double glazed units put in, and so on. There was loads and loads of work being done in schools, and it was being done all over the place. New blocks were being built, and I remember thinking to myself at the time, my God, he actually means it. But it dried up in about 18 months, and which I suppose was inevitable. But in the future we are going to need to upgrade the schools that we've got. Let alone thinking about building new ones, and we need to upgrade those schools with certain things in mind. And one of those things in mind has got to be the reduction of class sizes and so on. So it's got to be joined up thinking in terms of what we want to do in the future, what we want to achieve as a movement in the future. It's got to be joined up thinking. So it's going to be a difficult challenge, but it's a discussion that we need to have, and that we need to begin right now. It was developments in peacetime were even being talked about in wartime. The Education Act, which was passed in 1944, at the time of the D-Day landings, the Second Front opening up and so on, was anticipating peace in a time of war, and we've got to anticipate better times in a time of darkness and a time of unhappiness, and a time when things are looking really bad, and we've got to have that discussion. Some of us, when this second wave arrives, will undoubtedly not be around to see the outcome of it. But we've nonetheless got a responsibility to have this discussion. So we've got to look to the future, not for ourselves, but for future generations. And we've not only got to step up the fight against this virus, but we've got to step up the fight for a better world and a kinder world. And it can be done, and it will have to be done. So that's really all I want to say. So thank you for listening to me rambling on. Well, it's probably not the ideal thing to sort of cheer you up on what's a pretty wet and bloody cold June day. So anyway, take care of yourselves. Thanks for watching this podcast. I'm Bill, the Secretary of the Trades Council. Hope that we can all get together and meet soon. Even if it's even if we can't meet, it'd be nice to have a cup of coffee or a pint or something, but that time is not yet. So let's look to the better times, let's look to a better world, and let's fight for that better world. That's your lot. Bye for now.